Hello and welcome to today's session of Inspire Interactives. Inspire is a digital magazine launched by All India Professionals Congress, the AIPC, and is available on its official website. AIPC is a department of the Indian National Congress that brings together professionals from all walks of life and stands committed to the tenets of diversity, inclusivity, and equality. The Inspire magazine includes interviews, articles, and features carefully compiled from varied sources, focusing on areas of common concern. Inspire Interactives is the audiovisual arm of our digital outreach. Here we will be talking to change makers, thought influencers, policymakers, AIPC fellows, and indeed non-fellows. In short, anyone and everyone who has a particular perspective to share on a public platform and nurtures a desire to be heard, Inspire Interactives is here for you. It is also our constant endeavor to showcase the work being done in different parts of the country by our fellows, each AIPC fellow a professional in their own right. Inspire provides all of us with a dynamic shared space to discuss issues that matter to us, and more importantly, to society at large and the nation in particular. I'm Dr. Vandana R. Singh, Editor-in-Chief of Inspire. We have here with us today Mr. Aalim Javeri, COO, Chief Operating Officer of All India Professionals Congress. He is in charge of the administrative and operational functions of the AIPC at the national level. Aalim has extensive experience in parliamentary affairs and political action strategy. He has also worked with the United Nations in India, as well as in the field of private equity. In addition, Aalim has worked with children undergoing rehabilitation for developmental challenges. And in his spare time, interestingly, he's the host of an online cooking page for children. A very warm welcome to you, Aalim, on this brand new space created for meaningful interactions. Very happy to have you. Aalim, as our viewership is made up largely of professionals from all walks of life, this part of our guests' lives is of very special interest to us. We are keen to know about each other's professional journey. We are keen to step into each other's shoes and walk around in them for a bit. And so we are keen to hear your story, your early years, your aspirations, how you reached here. Over to you, Aalim.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Dr. Singh. We appreciate the effort and energy AIPC Inspire and the Inspire team brings. Essentially, yes, I'm a product of India. I'm very proud of the fact I have family that lives all across the world and all across India. My family is one of the reasons why I am in the Indian National Congress, because we're the story of India. My mother is half Hindu, half Muslim. She has family. Hers is the story of partition. Essentially, her late father was a refugee from Pakistan, who was kicked out of Pakistan for being a Hindu. Her late mother was an Indian who was a Muslim who refused to go to Pakistan and become a refugee. The two of them met and produced my mother. Both of them have huge legacies on either end of that spectrum. Conscientiously, we chose not to go to Pakistan, my family, because we fundamentally believe in the idea of India and the idea of an accepting India. That's always been my guiding light. In school, I was with the student leader there, and that was one of the first sort of examples I had of public service, and something I really value and appreciate. And essentially, since then, I've had this desire to serve and work. I've got family members who've been in the United Nations, been in the military. My family business in some form or the other has been service to India. And I'm the first person in my family who's actually thought of politics, surprisingly. And I guess between the tragedy and success that one experiences in life, one finds hope constantly. And that's something that strongly motivates me.
So your schooling was in, if I'm not mistaken, in Kodaikanal.
Yes, I studied in Hyderabad. Then my father died, and I was kidnapped when I was a kid, and there was a fear that something similar would happen again. So my mother packed me off to boarding school, and I went to Kodi International, probably Sanctuary. It was Sanctuary to me. It still is Sanctuary to me, the idea of it. From there, I went to Warwick, studied politics and international relations, and I always had the desire to work in the United Nations. I have a very special family member who, he kind of inspired me in many ways, and especially after my father died, he looked in a lot, to see how I was doing. He was someone who worked in the United Nations for a very long period of time. And when he would tell me, some of the things he'd do, and when I talked to some of his friends and all of that, I thought, wow, this is an amazing life. And after that, I worked for a little bit with the UN in India. I sort of interned with them in their office here, and it was a very interesting time because that was the time, it was 2014, when the election happened, and you had Prime Minister Modi and this new version of a more tech-centric BJP coming in. You also had an awakening, so to speak, of India's aspirations of technology. So all of a sudden, you were having all these ideas and indications of India coming up. So that was a very pivotal moment for me. After that, of course, I started working for Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Temporarily supposed to work with him for a year, in transit between one job in the UN and another, and then possibly a master's and all of that. What became 1 year is now 5 years, and AIPC has been my primary focus of work for a good 4 years.
So I can't resist asking at this point of time, what is it like working so closely with one of the best known faces of India, with Dr. Tharoor?
You see decency and you see respect firsthand. He's someone who has constantly taught me, with literally every step he takes, the value of decency. He never lets it get personal. He never lets it get petty. And you got to understand, in a discourse as saturated as ours is, in a sort of increasingly confrontational politic, where capitulation and conquest is the new mantra, and consensus is no longer seen as viable, or at least some are trying to portray that sense. It's really remarkable to have someone like Dr. Tharoor who still sticks to what he stuck to for about 40 years in the United Nations. What's it like working for him? I see decency at work every day, and I see fortitude at work every day. It would be so much easier. I work with him functionally on his politics. It would be so much easier for him to just abandon, and go for the easy way out. Make some journalistic statements and do all of that, but he doesn't. He still focuses on facts. He still focuses on nuance. He still focuses on respect.
Interesting, yeah. So we know of your interest in food, or shall I say cooking. What makes it more interesting is the fact that you host an online cooking page for children. So
yeah,
cooking for children, is that very different from cooking for adults, grown-ups, or what does it mean, cooking page for children?
So basically what happened was, my grandmother died a little after my father did. And she was someone who, this is my mother's mother, she was someone who really, she had a very strong hand in raising me and, keeping me focused. One of the things she loved to do was feed people, not necessarily cook for them, but feed them. And when she died, I was, in my late middle teens basically, and pretty much alone at that time. It was just my mother and me. I started to realize more and more that, increasingly this journey that I have in life is going to be more and more isolated, which is why I throw myself into my work, because if I allow the losses to resonate, then I wouldn't get out of bed every day. But in keeping with that, getting out of bed and trying to do things with one's life and make life meaningful, I went on a sort of walkabout. So I met this fruit seller a couple of days after my grandmother died. And I was driving along and I saw this fruit seller and I met him, a very sweet guy, very sincere guy. And I said, look, my grandmother just died and I basically want to give away some fruits to some of these people. He said, who? I said, well, I've got this orphanage and I've got this old people's home and I've got this halfway house. If you let me, here's some money. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not trying to rip you off. I'm basically giving it to someone else. I need you to trust that. And he said, I do. And he said, okay, fine. I've given you this box of fruit for how much you've paid me, and I've given you some extra. So consider that my charity. And he's like, I'm giving my charity through you. So I said, that's very kind of you. So I went to an old people's home. I went to an orphanage and I went to a halfway house. So a halfway house is for people who are destitute or homeless, but people who, who want to get their life in order, who are trying to get their life in order. And I went really late at night and, we were talking and they were just really cool talking to them, because they're like, yeah, what's it like getting educated? What's it like with college and all that? When I went to the orphanage, I spoke to these kids, the appreciation I got, the sincere, thank you. The sincere thanks and gratitude I got from these people from these kids was just inspiring. I mean, I never felt such a genuine appreciation, and all I did was give them some fruit. And then I said, I want to keep coming back. I want to do something. I want to do something meaningful here. And I didn't know what to do. So I thought about all the skill sets I had to offer, sort of the experiences I could translate. And I had when I was very young, in part because my late father was a great cook. I took up cooking and I never do things halfway. So then from that, I started apprenticing professionally at kitchens, and some of my closest friends became chefs and basically professionals in the hospitality space. And to this day, in fact, I have a lot of friends in the hospitality space across India. So I spoke to some of them and I said, look, this is what I want to do. They said, why don't you do it? Because no one talks to our kids about nutrition. No one talks to our kids about safety, about hygiene. So I did. And I started this little cooking page. It was just a YouTube. It still is a YouTube channel. And I'm sure, you can find the videos there. But basically, it was an opportunity for me to educate these kids. So teaching them how to cook is one part of a larger effort. It's about teaching them about hygiene, teaching them about health, teaching them about respect, trying to pass some life lessons through the necessity of food. We all got to eat. And that was something that really helped me. I mean, after that, and I did that because I was inspired by my grandmother, really. And I really wanted to do something I know she'd be proud of me for. That, I took a year out of university when I was in Warwick. And I volunteered at a pediatric rehabilitation center. So children with certain cognitive disabilities, cerebral palsy, autism, at this hospital in Hyderabad. I'm still a volunteer there. While I can't discuss a lot of the work I do because there's confidentiality implications and all of that, I made a documentary film about the hardship that some of these children face. There was this one instance where there was a child and a mother. So what happened was, for some reason, the mother felt it was her fault her child had autism. That somehow she had done something wrong. For whatever reason, this false notion was sort of there, and her child was blind in one eye in addition to autism. So discoloration in one eye, slightly unique behavioral patterns. People, when she would take public transport, thought that the child was possessed. So she would get onto the bus, and she told me once, she said, she came in tears one day to the center. And I said, what happened? And she said, I got onto the bus and everyone, first and foremost, no one sat next to us and no one gave us a seat. And I said, why? I said, because they thought the child was possessed. The child had autism and was blind in one eye. So there was discoloration in that eye. That's when I said, I need to do something again. So made a documentary film with a colleague at that time. And we basically documented what this parent and child's journey is like on a daily basis. And at that time, I spoke to the mayor. Again, go back to what I learned when I was in school. I spoke to the mayor and I said, boss, you got to come for the launch of this. And he did. And I said, we got to do something about this. And as a result of that, I wouldn't say just because of that one documentary film, but we mandated certain minimum assurances for all public transport in the city of Hyderabad. So now there are like reserved seats for people with special needs. Okay. So, that one food thing led into working with this hospital, that led into something else. There's a documentary film. So, I admit with the work I'm doing now, the AIPC, I don't get as much time to be able to do those things that I once used to do. But yeah.
So I have some sense of your inclination towards music, and the ringtone of your phone gives us a fair idea of the music that you like. But of late, it appears that there's something else that has engaged your attention, and that's the mountains. So in the recent past, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been up in the mountains more than once, I think. And we've been seeing some scintillating pictures of what some might view as an uphill task, but clearly you don't think it to be so. So this interest in mountaineering, mountains, is it something that has happened now, or is it something that you've been pursuing for a while? What's with you and mountains?
So I spent New Year's Eve alone climbing a mountain because, again, I felt I needed to elevate my perception, and I constantly do that. I always try and change things up in a unique way. And pleased to say, I've done quite a few mountain trips. Each one has been unique. Each one has been seminal, and you've got to experience it to understand it. But I tend to do my trips alone, and I tend to do them either alone or I do them with people who are locals, so not people who are connected with me, so, socially or functionally in my everyday life. Like, we only meet each other when I do these mountain trips. And it's probably one of the most inspiring ways to see India and to see yourself. Yeah. When you're in between falling to your death and climbing towards your dreams, there is no sugarcoating it. It is raw emotion. Yeah. And yeah, there have been many near-death experiences. I'm grateful for the fact that I've got a great team, I've got health, I've got the opportunity to do it. And I also think that every Indian should, in some way or the other, experience India. I'm not saying you have to climb a mountain to do so, but I'm saying you need to see a part of India that you have not traditionally seen. And you need to respect that we're all part of the same country. I think that's the biggest lesson. For me, obviously because of COVID and all that, you've had no international travel, but my colleagues and team would tell me that, you're very lucky. I said, why? It's because if it was any other occasion, you wouldn't get the ability to do any of this. I said, why? Because there'd be so many people from all over the world would be coming in to see these mountains and to climb these mountains. Like, people travel halfway across the world to see what is literally within a car, an extended car ride for me sitting in Delhi. So no, I climb mountains because they're there, and I climb mountains because I want to, in one way, I want to reduce the distance between my reality and my dreams.
Well, I've had some experience of mountaineering myself in the days of yore. And I felt that, while it's very exhilarating to reach the summit, but at the same time, once you are there at the peak, you look around and you realize, oh my God, there are so many more to climb. So it's something that feeds on itself, and yeah, it's a very, very unique experience. I think, as you said, that you have to experience it to really, to be able to internalize it. So, Aalim, you touched upon an issue right in the beginning of this conversation. And in that context, I would say that identity is an issue that has always been very important for most of us. And we all strive to create an identity of ourselves that may be unique to us. There are some who prefer to trace their lineage and retain that as their primary identity. So to each their own, I guess. However, of late, I feel that the question of identity has developed a life of its own, so to speak, and has actually become a cause for concern for some, on the one hand, and reason for, as I see it, misplaced jubilation for others. This undesirable focus on inherent, or if I may say, genetic identity, does this bother you? Would you say that in this day and age, for us to continue to indulge in profiling people basis their origin, mother tongue, personal beliefs, would you say it's an archaic idea, or you think that's what is going to take us into a bright new future?
I'm going to give you a slightly different answer. I think it's a cop-out. I think it's the easiest possible road for the political discourse to go on, the path of identity. The path of development, on the other hand, is the hardest one to go, because it's a lot easier for me to point to someone and say, see, he's different from me. I can other, we other each other.
Yeah.
In the name of social sanctity or social purity. But we don't look at ourselves. We are all others. We are all products of, the amalgamation of certain constructs. So the idea of India and the way in which an India can manifest itself cannot be through identity. It has to be through aspiration. That's been who we are. That's always going to be who we are. Because at the end of the day, in a country as large as India, in a country as diverse as India, who is a majority and who is a minority? What is a majority? What is a minority? How do you define it? A strata, a language, an association. What is the binding factor? The only universal binding factor is the fact that you are an Indian. That ultimately is wherein the conversation should begin and end. Because once we get into this minority, majority, I'm talking about today, I'm talking about 21st century India. I'm talking about an India with all-time high unemployment. I'm talking about an India with huge infrastructural challenges, huge educational challenges. I'm talking about an India where there are still people who don't have 3 square meals. I'm talking about an India where we're still talking about open defecation in 2021, in the same sentence that we're talking about bullet trains. This paradox will only become more paradoxical if we continue to obfuscate from the issues at hand. Identity is a distraction from the work of the country. Identity is an easy way to divert attention from what really matters, which is development. Unemployment does not make a particular distinction between a person of a religion or a strata of a religion versus another person. It also reiterates a wrong priority. I think if identity is the priority, then development is not the priority. So for me, politically, I think identity is an easy way out, and it's a desperate way out. We keep fanning the flame of identity when we don't have anything else to show on the areas of development, on the areas of progression. And I firmly believe that India's identity is one of acceptance, plurality. India's identity, and Indian identity, not India's identity for Indians. So what I'm trying to say is, my identity is that I'm an Indian, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
And that's all it should be.
This current tactics, which, as you rightly said, is is to divert attention from the real issues. But I wonder if people realize that, number one, that so much of unlearning is happening. Almost everything that we achieved in the last so many years, where phrases like anekta mein ekta and so on were the buzzwords. And really, it seems that all that has been undone. And the kind of harm that we are doing to society, the manner in which the social fabric is being literally torn to shreds. I really don't know how many years or how many decades it might take us to undo all this, if at all we find ourselves at a point where we could make that effort. So I think this it's doing irreparable damage to people, to young minds who are growing up currently, for whom this is the reality, who have not seen anything else. I wonder what kind of individuals they might grow into. It's really a very, very worrying thing, where you think that divisiveness is the norm. Then what are the kind of young minds that we are? What are we nurturing them on? What is it that we are feeding them? And this extremely toxic diet of communalism, of divisiveness. I suppose once
a sprinkling of misogyny. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So I really don't know where it's all taking us and how at all it can be undone. I do hope it can be undone someday. But which takes me to the next thing that you mentioned initially, and that was the partition of India, and you mentioned it in the context of your family. We all know that the partition of India caused havoc in millions of lives. And not only was it the most horrific event that India has seen, it was perhaps one of the most terrible things that has happened in world history, if I may say so. It has left scars, it has ruined some lives, families beyond repair. We have seen pain and misery and countless open wounds, some of which are still simmering, some of which are still there. And eventually each Indian then and each Indian now has to learn to deal with it in their own way. But what we are seeing of late is a rather peculiar way of trying to heal these wounds. I mean, for instance, declaring the 14th of August as Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. Would you say this is the most subtle way of remembering what has happened? Is it the best way of paying homage to those who lost their lives, to those who struggled to find their feet during those terrible feats and rebuild their lives? I mean, Partition Horrors Remembrance Day, what is it that we are, as a nation, that we are trying to do here by first giving it a name like this and then positioning it on the eve of the Independence Day? What is the messaging here? What is the intent here, would you say?
The intent is to deliberately divide people, and the intent is to ensure that the wounds remain institutional and irreparable.
Yeah.
By institutionalizing it in such a way, you are making that scar visible and permanent. You're not going to ever allow any healing of that scar. You're never going to allow for any kind of undoing, perhaps, of some of these disastrous decisions that were taken, some of the consequences. I mean, I don't think you have to go too far to find families that have been torn apart as a result of this. But I will also say this, I think the idea of partition spoke to the very soul of India. I think partitioning, I'm telling you, family members in my own case refused to adhere to the idea of partition because they said a partition of India was a partition of India's soul.
Yeah.
Distincting between people, othering each other, goes against everything that makes India great. It goes against everything we are as Indians. And for me, that has been something of great consequence. I think this entire approach, this entire conversation we are having with Pakistan needs to be considered, and considered in a way in which we're looking at what the long-term objectives are. And I think at the same time, Pakistan needs to realize that as a nation, if they want to be taken seriously in the world, they cannot afford to, continue down this road of a state sponsor of terrorism. You are doing the same. You are doing an injustice to your people who want peace, and you're doing more. You're doing unimaginable damage. And if you're doing it willingly, then fair enough, man. This is where we are. But if you claim if you claim innocence in the United Nations and claim that, as a nation, you are not, and that India is this, I think all of that is wrong. I think we need to be clear about who we are and who we aren't. If we are to behave as nations of the Westphalian thought, then we must act accordingly. And this business of state-sponsored terrorism and all of that has got to stop, because there's no question of peace. In that, I agree. And I don't say this politically. I say this as a citizen of this country. I unequivocally commit and agree with the idea of India. I believe the idea of India will outlast any political consideration, any ideological consideration. And the idea of India is a testament to the aspiration of India, which is to live in peace and with decency. That's what the Indian people want. But if you provoke us, if you threaten us, if you continue to carry out acts of terror, we will respond in kind, as is our right.
Yeah. In fact, as you said, I mean, not only by declaring this Partition Horrors Remembrance Day, not only are we tinkering with the wounds of those who actually suffered through this, but we are also, in a manner of speaking, including those who actually did not live through it. So we are making them feel hurt about something that they have not lived through. So this is really, instead of letting the wounds heal, we are actually inflicting fresh wounds where there were none. The current generation was not there at the time of the partition, but we are bringing it all back to them, and we are making them feel like a wronged party, and we are making them feel like victims, whereas actually they have not really been through it. And their families may have heard it from their grandparents and so on. But this manner of trying to assuage the hurt, as I said, is a most peculiar way of doing it. But it is what it is, I suppose. And thank you so much, Aalim, for being here with us today. I know you are pressed for time and you are required at another meeting. We would have absolutely loved to have gone on and asked more questions and discuss more issues. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us and your views. We wish you all the best in the future and all success for AIPC, of which we are all, of course, a part. And so with that, we come to the end of today's interactive session. On behalf of the Inspire team, I thank you once again, Aalim Javeri, for taking time out to be here with us today and having this very insightful conversation with us. Thank you, viewers, for being with us in this stimulating journey. If you'd like to share your thoughts and ideas with us, or indeed be part of an interactive session, do reach out to us at inspire@profcongress.in. We look forward to hearing from you. With these words, I close this session. Till next time then, thank you, good luck, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you and to talk to our colleagues. I think, when we came up with the idea of AIPC so many years ago, I think this is a testament to that. And when literally I was given AIPC in 6 or 7 sheets of paper, there's a concept note essentially that Dr. Tharoor drafted many years ago. And I think a greatest testament to the success of that idea is the fact that people like you, people like the people watching this particular conversation, the fact that you're associating with us and you're working with us and you're working through us to manifest your ideas and your versions for yourself and for the country, I think is the greatest proof of concept. And I look forward to more interactions like this. And I also look forward to more of our fellows using this as a platform to share and compare notes, as we like to say. And thank you for inspiring us. And I really appreciate all the work that the AIPC Inspire team does. I encourage everyone to look at the Inspire magazine, and I think you would be inspired continuously.
Thank you. Thank you, Aalim. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.